Welcome everybody to this EvoApps 10 session. We have several different interesting papers on various topics in this session. The first speaker is Zimeng Lyu, that is presenting an experimental study on the effects of weight initialization and weight inheritance on neuroevolution. So we have two papers on neuroevolution. Then we have a paper on effective universal unrestricted adversarial attacks and a paper on deep optimization. So we can start with Zimeng Lyu when you are ready. You have 20 minutes, and then we will have 5 minutes for the questions.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Zimeng Lyu. I'm a PhD student in Rochester Institute of Technology, and today I'm going to present an experimental study of weight initialization and Lamarckian inheritance on neuroevolution. So we all know that weight initialization is very important in training deep neural networks, and the poor weight initialization methods can lead to gradient vanishing and exploding problems. And many studies have shown that Xavier and Kaiming methods are effective in training deep neural networks. But in evolutionary algorithms, very few of the evolutionary algorithms use Xavier and Kaiming weight initialization strategies. Most of them are still use random weights for initial populations and child genomes. Few of them use Xavier weight initialization for initial population. For weight inheritance, most of them don't inherit weights from parents. Some of the evolutionary algorithms only use weight inheritance for mutation, that the children genome would copy the weights from the parents when they share the same components. The mutated parts still use the random weights. In our experiments, we found that weight inheritance is very effective in neuroevolution, and weights are inherited in our work. Weights are inherited from parents in mutation and crossover operations. This work is an experimental study of weight initialization and Lamarckian inheritance on neuroevolution. So there are 3 stages that we test on. The first is the initial population. We will initialize it with uniform random weight, Xavier and Kaiming weight initialization methods. For crossover and mutation, we not only test to reinitialize weights with 3 different weight initialization methods, we also try to use a Lamarckian weight inheritance method to inherit weights from both parents. And now we can take a closer look at weight initialization and inheritance methods. First is weight initialization methods. We would use 3 different weight initialization methods. That's Xavier, Kaiming, and uniform random methods. For Lamarckian weight inheritance in crossover, if both of the parents have the same component, the weight is generated by stochastic line search. The weight of the child is a combination of both parents' weight. WP1 is the weight from the more fit parent. WP2 is the weight from the less fit parent. And this random number R is generated from uniform random between -0.5 to 1.5. For mutation, we have different types of mutations. We have add edge or recurrent edge, add node, enable edge or node, disable edge or node with split or merge node, and clone. Some of the mutations do not add new components to the child genome. For example, split edge for example, enable or disable edge or node does not add new components. But some mutations such as add edge or node, split or merge node would actually have new components generated at the child genome. So when we have new components, the child genome is generated by the normal distribution where the mean and variance are from the parent genome, and other weights that will directly be copied from the parent. And the framework we use for this work is evolutionary exploration of augmenting memory models. And we call it EXAMM. This is a previous work that we published. This EXAMM is a distributed neuroevolution algorithm for evolving large recurrent neural networks. Those recurrent neural networks are used for real-world time series data prediction. And we have recurrent connections that will connect the current time step to the previous time steps. We have different kinds of memory cells that will evolve in the EXAMM. And we have scalable distributed parallel programming. We have MPI and multi-threaded version of this algorithm. To evaluate the genomes, we use the mean squared error on the validation data set. So this is a general view of how EXAMM works. First, we have a group of islands. Each island would have a maximum capacity, and all the genomes in one island are ranked by its fitness. So the best genome is the best. The first genome is the best one on this island, and one genome is generated for each of the island in a round robin fashion. So one genome generated for island 1 and one genome generated for island 2, and we rotate this until we reach the max number of genomes generated. For the current island, we have different ways to generate a new genome. We can generate it by crossover or mutation. If it's inter-island crossover, the first parent is selected randomly from the current island. The second parent is the best genome of a randomly selected island. For mutation, the parent is randomly selected from the current island. For intra-island crossover, two parents are randomly selected from the current island. And after the genome is generated, it will be sent to the worker for training and evaluation. All the workers use asynchronized scheduler because all the genomes are different and they require different amount of time for training. So the workers don't have to wait each other. Whenever it's available, the main process will send a generated genome to the workers to train. And after the genome is trained, it will get inserted back to the population. Because all the genomes are ranked by its fitness, so this genome will only be inserted back when it's at least better than the worst performing genome on this island. And so this is the overall EXAMM strategy. Now we can talk about the experiments. We use 3 real-world non-seasonal multivariant large-scale dataset. The first one is coal-fired power plant dataset from 12 burners. The second one is the wind turbine engine dataset. The third one is the aviation flight dataset. All of them are large-scale dataset, and we choose those different dataset because we want to test the performance of this strategy on data of different applications from the real world. And we also want to test it on the different number of output parameters. So this gave an example of how the output parameter look like in those 3 data sets. First, we know they all look very different, and it's very obvious that they are not seasonal data set. We use RAT research computing system to do all the experiments, and we use 72 cores for all the parallel programming. Some Kepler parameters that we used for this experiment, we have number of islands is 10, with each has a capacity of 10. We have mutation rate at 70%, intra-island crossover rate at 20%, and inter-island crossover rate at 10%. We evolve simple neurons as well as all sorts of different memory cells. Our recurrent edges can have recurrent connections anytime from current step to the future between 1 and 10. We test on 3 different stages for different weight initialization or inheritance method. We test on initial population, crossover, and mutation. for crossover and mutation, we will also test the Lamarckian strategy. We also tested backpropagation epochs for each genome that's generated. We are trying to have a fair comparison among different test cases. So we have a fixed number of backprop epochs at 200K, which means when we only train one epochs for the backpropagation for each genome, we generate 200K genomes in total. If we train 5 epochs for each generated genome, we generate 40K genomes in total, and so on. All the experiments are performed 20 repeated times. And now we can move on to the results and conclusion part. First is the result of the coal-fired power plant data set, and over 20 repeated runs. So those are the worst case, average case, best case, mean squared error, over 20 repeated runs on the best performing genome. The type here suggests which strategy we choose. For example, KLL means we use Kaiming for initial population, Lamarckian for crossover, and Lamarckian for mutation, and same for all other experiments. The orange boxes showed the best performing cases by average or by the best case among different backprop epochs. The red box here and here shows the best overall on this data set. We can see that except this one that use Xavier, and Xavier, by average, it's reached the average for backprop epochs 1. All other experiments by average case or best cases are actually all use Lamarckian for crossover or mutation or both, which showed that Lamarckian weight inheritance methods actually work and can significantly be better than other methods. This is the result for the wind turbine aging data set, and we have very similar results. In this data set, all the best cases come from using Lamarckian for crossover or mutation, or both. By average, basically all the best cases are using Lamarckian for crossover, and the overall best cases come from using Kaiming at initial population, Lamarckian for crossover and mutation. And in this case, by average and by the best, the best performing case come from Kaiming, Lamarckian, and Lamarckian. And for the aviation flight data set, it's basically the same results from the last 2 data set, except the best performing case come from Xavier, Lamarckian, and Xavier. And I mentioned earlier that we also tested test cases using uniform random weights. We didn't show the results of uniform random weights here because in all of the test cases, uniform random weights are performing the worst on different data set and different test cases. So to save more space, we didn't show the results for the random weights, uniform random weights. So this is the statistical results on main Whitney U tests. So we have pairwise significance test on different test cases to see if the test results are significantly different with a significance difference with alpha is 0.05. So when the number is marked in bold, it means they are significantly different. The code data set, not all the test cases are significantly different, but it performs pretty well for the wind and the flight data set. And what we care about here is the difference between non-Lamarckian method and Lamarckian method. For most of the test cases, we can see there are statistically different between using non-Lamarckian and Lamarckian methods. And this is the results for using Xavier weight initialization method. The second one is using Kaiming weight initialization method, and we have a very similar conclusion. On the code data set, it actually performs slightly better. basically same for the wind and the flight data set. And in the end, we want to know if Lamarckian weight is doing better than trained weight. So what we did is to, over the 20 repeated runs, we take the best MSE and average MSE and report it on the columns on the left. And on the right, we take those 20 best genomes and reinitialize with Xavier and Kaiming weight and retrain it for 3,000 epochs and compare the results. We can see on the left, for the best cases, actually, for coal and wind data set, most of the cases, Lamarckian weight is still outperform the retrained weight. For C172 data set, for the best cases, retrained weights outperform the evolved Lamarckian weights. But by average, all but one case on here show that Lamarckian weights is doing better than the retrained weights. Our conclusion is the Xavier and Kaiming methods outperform uniform random weight initialization method. Even though we didn't show the results here, but it's not random weight initialization is not performing better than Xavier and Kaiming in any test cases. The best performing test case used Lamarckian on crossover or mutation or both, as we showed before. The Meng EU test showed statistical difference between Lamarckian method and non-Lamarckian methods. And using Lamarckian weight inheritance could reduce the number of backpop epochs for training. At the last, evolved best genomes are reinitialized with Xavier and Kaiming weight, and they are retrained for 3,000 epochs. The evolved Lamarckian weight still outperform the trained weight by average. So thank you all for your time. And do we have any questions?
Thank you, Zimeng Lyu. So we have time for a few questions. Are there any? You can directly unmute yourself and ask. We have 20 people, so it should be manageable. Let's see if there are any takers. If there are none, I actually do have a question. You mentioned that you mentioned a few times that the datasets that you used as benchmarks were non-seasonal. Why is that important?
Because seasonal, there are a lot of methods to test with the seasonal data. The seasonal data are actually easier to predict than the non-seasonal data. You can use some of the classical methods to predict the seasonal data.
Okay. And let's see. Any other question from the audience? I don't see other questions. So I actually have a second question. From your experiments, you noticed that the methods you tried were superior for the initialization of the random weights, and the Lamarckian method seems better in general, they seem better to provide better results for crossover and mutation. And my question is, however, the very best method for every case study was slightly different, right? You had a different combination of Lamarckian and the other technique and so on. For the moment, besides saying, okay, this is Lamarckian is better than just the rest, do you have any recommendation if someone wanted to use EXAMM on a new case study? What combination would you recommend?
Actually, because this is highly depend on the network and the data set we use, it's really hard to say. We can see that I mentioned in my talk for the wind turbine data set and for the coal-fired data set, the overall best performing case are using Kaiming and Xavier weights and also the flight data set. They are different. We try to find a conclusion to see which method is doing better, but we didn't because it varies among different data sets. And what we can see is using Lamarckian is doing significantly better. And also using Lamarckian for crossover actually have the average best performance because, you know, for crossover, most of the weights are actually combined between parents. And for mutation, using Lamarckian, only the new generated weights are using parents' mean and standard deviation. So there's not a lot of things to inherit from the mutation, but in crossover, you have more combination of the both parents. So combination on the crossover have shown significant good results.
All right, so we have a more general question from the audience, from Juan Lastradies. It's a more general question on Neuroevolution, and the question is, how does an artificial neural network that has been designed with Neuroevolution compare against a handcrafted one, someone that has been, you know, the usual stuff, someone look at the literature, they took the structure and they used it. How does it compare in terms of performance and training time?
Yes, so research have shown that the networks generated by evolutionary algorithms are doing better than handcrafted networks. And some research have compared handcrafted networks with the machine-generated networks and test their performance. And the evolved networks are doing better. That's because actually for different applications, different data sets, you have specific niche that you need to learn, and the machine actually can learn it better by generating a lot of genomes or networks to find where it can do better. But handcraft is basically based on your experience in doing such work, that each person's experience and knowledge is actually limited. And nowadays, most of the machine learning algorithms, good performing networks are generated by auto machine learning and or evolutionary algorithms. Some of them use reinforcement learning, some use evolutionary algorithms, but indeed machine generated networks are doing better than handcraft networks in many cases.
All right. Thanks. If we have to, I think that, however, the downside is the training time. Usually, it takes longer for Neuroevolution to obtain. Of course, it takes longer because you are exploring the space of all possible topologies. So usually the time to get a complete network for your problem is longer, right?
Not really. Actually, in our test cases, because we use distributed computing, we use our network is scalable. We can scale to a couple hundred cores. Currently, we're using 72 cores, and also we can see that the backup epochs for training is very little actually compared to the deep learning training. So indeed, for each generated genome, we don't have too much time to train them. And also because it's a recurrent network, it's not as big as the convolutional neural network. But indeed, it does not take too much time for training. For most of the experiments, for 20 repeats of each experiment, it would take a couple hours, less than a day. I would say it take a couple of hours because I combine them together to train. But yeah, it really depends on how you evolve network and how you design your parallel programming scheduler to do that.
All right.